Good morning, everyone. Nope, it's not morning. Good afternoon. It is 2 o'clock. Oh boy, it's Monday. I'm going to blame that it's Monday. Thank you for joining us. I'll give everyone a moment. It looks like there's some folks still connecting. All right. I am Ashley Sklar. I am the Adult Services and Community Engagement Consultant here at the Connecticut State Library. And I am excited today to be here with our partners at the Connecticut State Education Resource Center to lead this session, Teach My Kid to Read. You're going to get to hear from a number of folks. Just some housekeeping before we get started. Please do use the Q&A throughout. We'll be keeping an eye on that. Sorry, not the Q&A, use the chat for your Qs, for your questions. And we'll be keeping an eye on that. We'll, if there's clarifying questions, we'll kind of jump in, pause and get your questions answered. If it's a really meaty kind of substantive question, we might save it till the very end. We do have the live caption features turned on and available for you. You can find all those controls down in the bottom, as I'm sure you know. Other than that, please mute yourselves, and we're excited to have you here. Claire, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you. My name is Claire Conroy. I am the dyslexia consultant at Connecticut State Education Resource Center. You may be familiar with us mostly through our library, which is open, by the way. A lot of people thought that we closed, but we are open by appointment. Please come visit us. We have a number of amazing assistive technology devices and things that would be amazing for your patrons. So I just wanted to explain, I learned about the Road to Decode and Teach My Kid to Read through a Facebook group, actually, on the Science of Reading, which is an international group. It's over 150,000 people on there. And essentially what I was trying to do was trying to find professional development that is tailored towards people like you know, professionals in what I consider education, but you may not be working directly with students. You know, you may not be in a traditional school. And it was very, very important to me as the daughter of a librarian that we bring this to Connecticut. So I'm very, very excited that, that we have this presentation today. Thank you.
Okay, I guess I'll begin. Hello, everyone. I'm Marian Waldman, and I'm the founder of Teach My Kid to Read. And today I'll be presenting with two other speakers, Tracy Young, and she'll be providing background on the current climate of literacy and how we learn to read. I'll talk about the different resources used to teach kids to read and explain how decodable books fit. And Mandy, our partner here from Kinderhook Memorial Library in Kinderhook, New York, will review how her library implemented a collection of decodable books and really what that initiative entailed. So a little bit about us. We believe that for all kids to become skilled readers, we need to change the culture of literacy, and that takes a village, and that's you, that's libraries and schools and the community. Parents and guardians need to learn early what helps most kids learn to read, and parents of struggling readers need lots of options besides paid tutors that only families with means can afford. By learning more about what helps all kids learn to read and recommending and stocking the resources that support those skills, librarians can make such a huge difference. And we hear a lot from librarians that stock decodable books, how amazing it is to see struggling readers finally reading independently. And we know you have a lot on your plate and change isn't easy. So we hope in partnership, we can demonstrate how community literacy solutions can change lives. So we're covering a broad range of topics today, but really, our goal, and I'm going to interrupt for a second, I forgot to mention, I'm actually recovering a bit from COVID, and I bring this up in that we have a lot to go over, and I don't want to be a distraction. And if I start coughing a lot, my esteemed colleague, Tracy Young, is going to take over. So that we're covering a broad range of topics, and our goal is really to enable you to leave this presentation with information and tools that help you implement more options to families of early and struggling readers.
All right, so let me go in and kind of provide a little bit, start at the top. And we know that 95% of all children have the ability to become skilled readers. So that's really important, because one of the things you hear is that we have a literacy crisis in the United States. We're in a situation where over 32 million people are considered illiterate. 2/3 of 4th grade students are not reading proficiently at grade level. And the situation doesn't change in the 8th grade or in high school. You see that similar numbers of like 2/3 of students are still not proficient. And that's begged at the question of, it's like, well, why? And to kind of delve into it. And so part of what we want to do is to give you a little bit of background, so that when someone comes to a library, you have a little bit of it's not even the understanding of kind of the radars are going and talking about struggling readers, because struggling readers really exist on a continuum, and it affects much larger spectrum that we see, that we initially think, right? We have approximately 18% of children that are classified as special education, but in fact, 60% of the population is a struggling reader. Let's go to the next slide, please. Okay. Part of the reason for that kind of continuum, shall we say, is that we see that about 45% of kids will teach themselves to read. It's as simple as that. 35% of children, it doesn't matter how we teach them, but then that they're going to learn to become proficient readers. But it's that 60% that's remaining that really needs a structured program. And Connecticut is really leading the way, and you've implemented changes that are going to help that. But when a parent kind of comes in, right, and Mandy will talk a little bit more about that later, like, what are some of the questions that you can ask? The parent might say, you know, something's off, but I'm just not quite sure. Some of the signs or questions that you can ask the parent include, are they struggling with learning nursery rhymes? That's like one of the first things, and really easy. Do they enjoy nursery rhymes or have no tolerance and just can't seem to pick up on that language manipulation? You see perhaps a delay in fine motor skills, right? Do they have trouble retrieving the name or the words for something? Do they use that thingamajig or the whatchamacallit? I mean, these are really what adults say, but do they kind of struggle to, you know, it's that thing you write with, right? Confusion between left and right. And sequencing is also a key element. Mistaking letters, and I'll talk a little bit about that shortly, and kind of an inability to spell. And some of these are things that depend on the age, but some of them are not. Like, taken all together, it may indicate signs of a struggling reader. Now, we have approximately 10 to 20% of the population that is dyslexic. And so it runs in the family, it is brain-based, and it is not related to intelligence. But if I'm saying 20% are dyslexic and 60% are struggling readers, that's still 40% of the population that the parents make them into the libraries and say, something is off, can you help us? Next slide, please.
Yeah, and I want to add too, Tracy, here that in your digital toolkit, you have a struggling reader action plan. And actually, I believe it was handed later, that handout. That's something you can provide to parents as well.
How did we get here? And part of the issue is kind of, there's been an assumption that we know that babies learn to speak, and it's a natural occurrence, right? And there was some thought that maybe reading is kind of the same way. It's not. It is absolutely not. If we take a look at the skilled reading formula, that learning to read, there are kind of two components. And Scarborough's rope gets into much more detail. But if you take word recognition, so skilled readers have mastered to automaticity two different elements. The first element is that word recognition, the ability to decode the letters that are presented and interpret the letters to sounds, right? The second part is the language comprehension. So things such as background knowledge and vocabulary and other elements. Both of those work together to create skilled readers. When one is lacking, then the whole skilled reading falls apart. So it's not as if a child can overcompensate in another area. And we'll talk a little bit more about decodables and how it's a fabulous way to help that word recognition part of the equation, right? And there are many things that parents, like librarians, can encourage parents to do, and so forth. Next slide. So as I mentioned before, what really happens in the brain? For years, for decades, centuries, we weren't quite sure. And now, because of functional MRI, we have a much better sense of what is going on. So the part of the brain that we use to read is the same part of the brain that we use for visual recognition. So if I look at a chair, my brain knows that's a chair. If I take and I flip it upside down, my brain says that's still a chair. If I turn it left to right, or a mirror image, my brain still knows that's a chair. But what happens with letters? Now, it's the same part of the brain, but we have to teach it to undo that relationship, whereby if a letter, look at the B, is flipped, it now becomes a D. Whereas before, the chair was still a chair. And if I flip it again, right, I have a Q. And if I turn it, then I have a P. And that has to be learned. And why is this so important? Because what can happen is that if children don't process or that part of the brain doesn't get to automaticity, then they're inefficient readers. And the best analogy that I can make is skilled readers go, let's say, from Connecticut down to Miami. You're taking an airplane, you get on the, you go to the airport, you get on, it's a direct flight, get down to Miami, and you're done. You've read the book, you understand it, great. Struggling readers take a detour. They actually they use the left and the right sides of the brain, and it takes them longer and it's inefficient. So the analogy would be they go to Miami via Chicago, have a layover, and eventually get there. It takes so much of the working memory to process, whether it's the decoding of the different elements, that it impacts their ability to become a skilled reader, right? And so some of the things that there are specific things we could work on, whether it's phonological awareness, the decoding, the sight recognition, that are all of the elements that make skilled readers. Next slide, please. So English is an alphabetic language. And what that means is that the letters represent the sounds. We always ask, or children know, we've got how many letters in the alphabet? We have 26 letters in the alphabet. The better question is how many phonemes, how many sounds do those letters make? And there are 44. And this is really important. And this is where, again, the changes that your state is making are so critical, because children need to learn that if you put a T and an H together, that digraph makes a different sound. And it's those 44 phonemes that we start to manipulate. Okay. Next slide, please. Marion?
Yeah.
Okay. So some of the things that you can do, right, is that, and sometimes we do this at the library, whether it's a story time where we have children like clap along. And what we're doing is learning how to manipulate sound, learning how to manipulate words, and learning how to manipulate syllables. So any type of rhyming activity with words paired in nursery rhymes and simple books for the sheep in a Jeep, just kind of to get children listening, because it's really an auditive process that becomes so important so that children can develop what's called orthographic mapping. It just means you're at the point of automaticity. It is so fast and so instantaneous. And it's taking and making it fun. Use puppets on how to model words, how they sound, and what happens if you change the consonant between onset and rhymes. And, you know, these are words that we take, and it just means that we cut the word between the first vowel and what's at the end and so forth. And it's stuff that we do all the time with kids and so forth. And just really making it fun so that these elements are not hard, because learning to read is hard for that. Next one. So some of the things that, you know, wide range storytelling is fabulous. And what's great about storytelling is that it builds vocabulary and background knowledge. So ask questions when you're doing it with engaging. There's a wonderful thing to improve storytelling, you know, prompt the little engine that could. What did the little engine say that showed that they were working hard to try to, just different things that we can do to engage the children and start them thinking about the whole process, or that the story, and mulling it over, evaluating, expanding on it, and repeating. And there are many, many different things that we can do that to help that back and forth conversation with children of all ages. Graphic novels can be a wonderful way for slightly older struggling readers to engage, because the more they practice, the better they get at it. And a struggling reader is not necessarily going to want to do it because it's hard. Audiobooks are fabulous. The child can have a hard copy and follow along so that you get the orthographic mapping, how you pronounce certain words, and so forth. Anything diverse literature that helps the student or a child see themselves in the book. High-low books are great for storytelling because, again, you're building that vocabulary and background knowledge that becomes so important. So lots of things that you're currently doing. Next slide, Marion, please.
Yeah, that's me too. And, you know, Tracy, one thing I want to expand on too is the, you know, access to diverse literature, because it's something we feel strongly about. We have our own wish list on our website. And, you know, sometimes there's a myth that the instructional side of learning to read that must be taught, that's all, you know, that's just, that we're linear, an organization focused on that is not necessarily interested in authentic text or other types of literature. And we really like to make it clear that for all kids to learn to read, they must be taught. And that's what Tracy was really trying to just hit home, that kids must be taught that decode, to train their brain to read, but that they also must have access to wonderful books. And we're really advocates of both sides, of just making sure kids have access to books that look like them, and that kids are taught to read, because there's, I think maybe 5% will learn no matter what you do, but most kids need to be taught. So I'm going to veer now to the phonics side of learning to read, and to just clarify what phonics is, because it's a term that gets thrown around quite a bit. But when we talk about it, especially with some of the ways, you know, your state is implementing some changes, we're talking about explicit, systematic, and a cumulative way of teaching the skills so that kids become fluent readers. They learn to recognize and pronounce the words with automaticity, and that's phonics decoding. So what decodable books are is they are the connected text. They are the books that support this phonics instruction by simply providing the practice in the skills they have just learned. And this picture is a photo of a series called Whole Phonics, a nice, bright new series for early readers that a lot of libraries have been offering. So also, as we'll go through, not all phonics books look the same. But I'm going to go through now a little bit about what what decodable books are, because it really is a growing genre. There's more and more decodable books that come on the market each day. We get sent new decodable books all the time. So they all have one purpose, but there are some differences. So all decodable books, and this is where I wish we were in person, they provide a bridge between language comprehension and decoding skills. And you probably can't see it, but in your digital toolkit, you've got this poster. And we ask libraries sometimes to laminate it and put it up in a display. I saw it, Mandy, at your library. And it shows that little bridge of how, you know, kids need access to rich language experience and all kinds of books so that they can understand what they're reading, but they need to be taught the skills, and then they need practice. So that little bridge are the decodable books, which is the practice. And then once kids become fluent, the world opens up to them. The magic of the library is there. So that's what that poster signifies. The other thing is most decodable books follow a scope and sequence. It's a progression, and I think you have a sample in your toolkit, and I like to describe it simply as directions. If you're putting complicated furniture together and you have to follow a scope and sequence, you lay things out, all the little tools, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and sometimes you realize you missed a step and you have to go back, or something is going to go wrong. And then there's always those people that just look at the pictures here and there and they get it and they could put it together, but most of us aren't like that. And that's what a scope and sequence is like. Most children need to be taught, you know, sequentially, in a way, again, that in a logical pattern that builds on skills from simple to complex. And so it is a map. It's these books follow a map. They have a plan. They provide practice after the skill has been taught. And one of the metaphors that you constantly hear is they're the training wheels. And once kids are fluent, they don't need them, but they enable them to practice. And once they start having that automaticity, off they go. They don't need these books. Again, some of them support very specific phonics programs. Again, all of them follow some type of generic scope and sequence, some type of map. But then there's other kinds too. There's decodable books that don't necessarily follow a scope and sequence, but they're on the scope and sequence. And these are really great books too, and there's less of them. But what they do is, if there's kids that are at a specific skill level, they can read age-appropriate books and still get practice at their phonics skills where they are. And this photo is Simple Words Books, because that's a publisher that publishes plays, and a lot of different options for older kids struggling. And I mean, these are the books that remind me of before Mandy initiated her Decodable book collection. One of her patrons just said, "I want you to carry books my kid could read." And even though I think she meant geodes, I always think of simple words books. These are books that older kids can read, and they're really interesting. I've read some of them, and it's just wonderful that they can have access to this content and still work on becoming fluent. There's also still a lot of research going on in this world. There are decodable books that are highly decodable with very few non-decodable books. They have what might be even called contrived language, and there's different schools of thought on this, that sometimes it's better to have a book that has contrived language, so the kids can get as much practice as possible. And then there's other schools of thought that it's better if it's less decodable, and decodables don't include contrived language. And Claire, I don't know if you follow any of this research, but we do here. We work with someone involved in the research world to constantly say, is one better than another? And right now, really, the jury is out. But what we're trying to do is present to you the full range of this world of decodable books. And finally, there's also decodable books that are standalone programs. And an example is Beginning Reading Instruction, also known as ICSAM, which is a rather plain looking set of books. We offer them free through our outreach, and the kids love them because they can read them. These books were commissioned by the government in the 1970s with wonderful results. And even though they're a little older than some of the other decodables, I have seen firsthand with my own eyes that kids are able to get through them. There's a purpose to them, and it's important to know. So there are decodable books that stand alone as their own program. And finally, I'll just add too that a lot of the decodables come with workbooks. Libraries usually are allowed to make copies. They can buy one, make copies for their patrons. We check on the copyright for almost all the publishers, certainly on the list that's provided in your digital toolkit. But a lot of these books can also work as programs where if parents wanted to work with their kids. And there are decodables that go with homeschool curricula, but many of these books have lots of use. So moving on. Not all books are decodable. Not all phonics books are decodable. I think it's important as librarians to be just aware that, there's really, really fun phonic books, Pinkalicious, Thomas the Train, and phonic books are not decodable. They might have a couple of words that are, again, just think Pinkalicious. But, as a parent myself, when my daughter struggled, I was always attracted to books like this. And if I saw the word phonics, I thought, oh, this would be a good book for her. She's struggling. And then I would wonder why she couldn't read. And I know now this all seems obvious, it seems obvious, but I know for me, I found it very confusing to figure out, what was the difference in all of these resources. And so it's important to keep in mind that phonic books are fine, and we're going to get to, what the use is for these books, but they're not decodable. So types of books to teach kids to read. We focus now on decodable books, but I'm going to talk a little bit about the difference between leveled textbooks as well as authentic textbooks. And I want to make one thing too clear. We're not here to say leveled textbooks are all bad. We just want to make sure that the intended purpose of these books is clear. And with leveled and predictive textbooks, what's hard is you probably notice, if anybody's familiar with Lexile, there's all different types of gradients of how leveled texts are graded. So it's a little bit hard to know exactly where your child is in a leveled text, because the different series have different criteria. But to talk about where they fit, decodable books, as we said, they're sequential and they're intended to teach kids to read with accuracy, to become fluent, to read with 100% accuracy. And I don't know that 100% might be an overestimate, but to read with accuracy. And what leveled books, and we'll start with predictive, repetitive text, and those are like pre-readers. And what those do is they tend to use like a high frequency content to teach kids to infer. And I would say an example is those early reader books that maybe have a banana on one page, an apple on another page, a pear, this is an apple, this is a pear. It's to teach kids to refer. And with leveled books, again, there's so much different criteria. And I have a whole laundry list of leveled books and how they're organized on length, size and layout of print, vocabulary and context, language structure, word count, number of words, content. But leveled books are intended to teach kids to read based on guessing, looking at the pictures. And they do build language skills. There is a place for them. And, we're going to get to that in a second. But for children learning to read until they are fluent, level textbooks are just not going to be as effective teaching children to start to pronounce the words. It's not their intent. So here's an example of a leveled reader versus a controlled reader, which is also called decodable text. And if you look at this, and this is an assessment given after first grade with the leveled reader, words like library, even with silent E, look at all the different types of phonic rules that are presented in these leveled readers versus a controlled reader. You could start to really see the difference in the value of these texts. So to just summarize, decodable books are really to practice phonics, high frequency words, and to read accurately, literal comprehension. And leveled readers build language skills, concepts of print, getting the meaning. So that's the difference of the two types of books. And what we used to say early on in our programming too is, that decodable books are often just the missing tools, in the tool shed. But we started this programming because as a parent in this world, personally, I wondered why I couldn't find the types of books that helped my daughter learn to read and that were recommended to support, her interventions. And we always wondered why libraries didn't carry decodables, or it seemed, like it was something that came up a lot in the literacy space. And so we're passionate about making decodable books available through libraries, through communities, schools, to early and struggling readers, because we know it can make a difference. We know it contributes to equity, that parents should know about these books. They should know more about how we learn to read, and they should have access to these books. So this is the core of our programming. And with that said, I'm going to turn this over to Mandy, who from the Kinderhook Memorial Library in Kinderhook, New York, the assistant director.
Yeah, hi, my name's Mandy. I'm the assistant director of the Kinderhook Memorial Library. We're a small rural library in upstate New York. We serve about 6,000 patrons. And really we had to kind of decide what our core values were as staff and, how we serve our patrons when we embarked on the decodable reader journey. We're kind of, our job as natural collaborators. We're working with schools, we're working with other libraries, community organizations, parents, and more. So we're kind of natural partners for this sort of project. You know, obviously libraries are a place to learn about reading instruction. We're very clear with parents that we are not reading instructors. You know, it's not necessarily our jobs to interpret what people find in the library, but we certainly are the place where people can go to find those things. But we have resources for parents about interventions, instruction, resources that can help them support skilled reading. We try our very best to eliminate barriers to access to resources. So I know a lot of states are doing away with fines. We recently went fine free. We're part of the Mid-Hudson system that's got 66 libraries in it. You know, we're very liberal with, you know, sharing resources and things like that. So we kind of had to really define all of this for ourselves when we were like, well, why are we doing this? Why are we doing decodable readers? This is why. You can move to the next slide. So I'm just going to talk briefly kind of as a case study about how our decodable reader journey went. It was really set off by one individual patron who's kind of a model for advocacy for her child who has dyslexia and was becoming increasingly frustrated with the public school. Now, this was a little bit delicate for us because we have, you know, we feel we have a responsibility to maintain a very robust relationship with our public school. And we didn't want them to feel like we were kind of encroaching on their territory. But we knew we wanted to respond positively to this patron who was asking for help. We felt that that was well within our wheelhouse of our jobs. So she reached out to us via email with like a very beautifully worded email that informed us about what decodable readers were, because I had no idea. I'm the assistant director now, but I was the children's librarian at this time. I still do children's services and a myriad of other things, but I had never heard of it. And she hooked me up with Teach My Kid to Read. So we signed up for the Road to Decode and, you know, just got to doing some research. The cost, what would be the most impactful starter collection. This patron specifically asked for Geodes, which when in my research I learned is just simply the most expensive package of decodables that you can get. But at the time, our director, who is now the executive director of the New York Library Association, she's kind of an incredible force, and there's pretty much nothing that she'll say no to if it's beneficial to the library. And she said, okay, yeah, let's see how we can get some money. Overall, we raised, well, I'll talk about how the patron initiated the fundraiser. We wrote back to her and said, hey, listen, we're going to apply for some grants. We're going to go to our board to secure some extra funding, some discretionary funding. But would you, be able to maybe put the word out and do some fundraising? She's very well connected with our community. We live in an agricultural community. Her husband's a farmer who knows everyone who knows everyone. So she put the word out and was able to raise kind of an unbelievable amount of money for this collection. We got a $2,000 grant, and then we got a matching funds from our board, from our discretionary funds. You can, so all told, we raised about $10,000. Geodes comes in 3 levels, and you can see in the picture there is about $7,000 without the classroom package. So purchasing, I just hooked up with one of their sales representatives, and they sent it to us on a massive pallet. It's a lot of books. We're a small staff. We have 3 full-time staff. This was my entire summer project, was just cataloging this entire collection. This actually ended up being super beneficial to us because it established a very, very fruitful relationship with our system. We kind of had asked them questions piecemeal about things we needed help with, but this was like an actual collaboration. I reached out to one of the catalogers at our system, and said, hey, I have this like really overwhelming project that I don't know if you have time for. And of course she like gleefully was like, I have the time and I'm very excited to work on this with you. So she did all the original cataloging for all of these books. I think there's, I don't even know how many, almost 200 individual titles in Geodes. We also bought whole phonics, a couple of other things, some of the series from High Noon Books we got. We have the I Am Sam, but it was just a massive feat in original cataloging. I was responsible for entering in each individual item on the item level. It took several months. The number of stickers that I used was astronomical. And I would say essentially staff time is one of the most perhaps in short supply things that libraries might have. I was lucky enough to be able to cut a lot of things out of my day to just be able to focus on this. It was summer, it was COVID times. We were on a very shortened schedule, which is probably the only way that I was able to get this done. So for outreach, we bought this, got $10,000 worth of geodes. We better let the word be known. So we presented at our school board to let them know that we had this new collection. And someone from the local paper was there whose brother had dyslexia and was very kind of personally moved by this. So she ended up doing an interview with our director at the time, which resulted in more donations. And we've been since kind of trying to sustainably grow the collection since then. We made a massive like front page announcement about the collection in our newsletter, which hit 6,000 mailboxes. We've been working with Teach My Kid to Read, trying to get some workshops going to kind of educate parents, teachers, anyone else who's interested and utilizing the collection. You can go to the next slide. You can actually go back. So basically our kind of end goal for this is that we would love to be like a tutoring hub. The good thing about Geodes is that they send 4 individual copies of each title. So that's like 400 books that we have just kind of kicking around, that we would love to have a tutoring library available for reading instructors or parents or anyone who wants to, anyone out of system. We have 66 libraries in our system. So it's a little bit like 66 libraries have access to this collection. But for those that would like to use this in-house, anyone connected with our local school system, we would like to have a tutoring library available. Okay.
What I want to add too that's kind of interesting is that working with the public libraries and working with some of the schools, either the teachers or the libraries, is that these initiatives have driven the schools to build their decodable books, and then everybody starts to want to learn a little more.
I should add that because of this, our school system invested several $1,000s in a decodable collection of their own. Now, the outcome is good, but our kind of we didn't want this to become like a competitive thing that we were forcing their hand in some way or forcing them into like things that they weren't prepared to do. But, all of the reading instruction happens there. So they should also have a collection like this if the end goal is to teach kids to read. So overall, we're very pleased about the response from the school. And, we hope to work together to kind of share these collections between us.
Well, one of the things that the 3 of us talked about is that we often hear from libraries too. Is there just a $500 starter collection that we can start to learn about, that we could look at to see if the patrons take out the books, just what some of the feedback is. So what this slide really is just an example of what $500, might you might be able to purchase. And I'll just run through it quickly. Whole phonics is it's just a very library friendly series. And in the next slide, you'll see we do a decodable, or 2 slides, we do a decodable story walk. with it, which just excites me to no end, because really it just brings this whole, it just brings everything we've been saying alive. And I always say it normalizes it, and just people, just in a fun way. But anyway, to get back to whole phonics, it's a great starter set. Phonic books, these are some books for older kids. They look like books for older kids, but they're at the same level as some of the phonic books. Simple word books. I had mentioned those are the decodable books that are at specific skill levels and have plays and just lots and lots of different subjects, topics. You Can readings, just another fun little early reader that supplements a couple of different types of phonics more library friendly, fun book that when kids have reached certain skill levels, they can actually enjoy. Dog on a Log, they have a number of options, but their pre-readers can be nice, especially for parents. And these are one of the few library ready books. But Dog on a Log has like these early reading maps where it'll walk a parent through all of the skills that Tracy talked about earlier, because sometimes you just need a guide. And so I always like to include those books. And Junior Learning are also kind of like phonic books. They have a couple of series and brand new series for older kids. And I like to really keep an eye on what we could find or recommend for older kids, because there's less there. And that's where the struggle is really acute. So that's like an example of a $500 starter set. And then Mandy, I think this is.
I will also add, there's a comment in the, I believe, Claire, that you wrote in the chat box about how these books are just for everyone. And I will add that, like, we haven't had like pushback in the sense, I would say that the pushback that we've gotten from parents is for us to emphasize that these books are for everyone, because everyone has to learn how to read. And not to quote unquote other the collection as like, oh, this collection's only for certain people. It's for everyone that has to learn how to read, which is everyone. So I think our end goal here is we have the collection kind of in its own spot. But I think also one of our goals is to situate it between our leveled readers and our step-ups as like, this is your sort of, you have many options for how to get to kind of the all the other books in the library, and this is just one of them. It's not trying to integrate the decodables into our other beginning reader collections as well. So that's, and I think that hearing that from parents with kids with dyslexia saying this is not just for kids with dyslexia, it's for everyone, has sort of changed our marketing language and our marketing strategy, as this is just another way to learn how to read that works for some people, or probably works for many people.
Mandy,
yeah, so,
and if I could also just say, one of the lovely things about it is children practice, and it's through that practice that they get better at it. And so that was one of the elements that was so important to kind of in providing a $500 starter kit, to kind of think about, well, not everyone can start with the Rolls Royce of Geodes, but make it accessible to everyone, because that 60% of struggling readers is, we see it everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So our relationship with Teach My Kid to Read has been really essential in kind of our sort of looking inward as to what our jobs are as kind of champions of literacy. Of course, we do have our, early reader storytime programs. I've certainly added new elements to my story times that I feel kind of go hand in hand with what decodable readers are trying to accomplish. So if you haven't already, kind of joining and seeing what other libraries are up to has been really invaluable to us for pushing our mission forward.
Yeah,
actually,
I'm so sorry, Marian, but I got a private message from someone that I think might play off of what you're saying, Mandy, and might have sort of been in response a little bit to something that Claire had said above on, what exactly is the program? So, we understand the purchose of the Decodable books and sort of the why. There's some overlap between what you all have explained to us and Every Child Ready to Read, for example, with phonological awareness and sort of that. But like, with regards to the program that a public library might receive from Every Child Ready to Read, what is that, or is that something that a library would have to build or market, sort of similar to the way that you've described, Mandy? I think like, is there a like physical program, like a Reimagine School Readiness or a Mother Goose on the Loose type of situation?
Right, there's not. I would say that our approach was kind of like an act first, ask questions later approach, which is not right for everyone. But all of the elements kind of fell into place for us. It's kind of right now, it's still new, it's less than a year old. The collection is passive. It's found by people who need it. It's found by people who just pass by it and are interested in it. We would like to have like a physical program for it, but we just haven't gotten there yet. We lost our director. I don't want to say lost her.
But like the struggle, the rudderless feeling of struggle.
We had a lot of like personnel upheaval. We have a new director. I've moved into this new position. I will say one of the big struggles is like, what do we do with this? We're not reading instructors. We're not teachers. We're librarians.
I think that's like the question that's coming in. We don't do one-on-ones as much with kids, right, or even parents, with the exception of a couple situations. So I think maybe that's kind of what this question was alluding to.
Yeah, and we have a robust need for reading, tutoring, instruction, like outside of school. We've heard a lot from parents that they would love to have like a more formalized center for tutoring for reading instruction outside of the school. And we would love to be like at the forefront of that. It's just a lot of elements that need to come into play. And I think working more with Teach My Kid to Read to do some more informational workshops about this specific collection is going to be really important for us. We've done one workshop so far that unfortunately wasn't well attended, but we did it during spring break, which was a massive error on my part. So we do have teachers that are interested, and ultimately we would like to sponsor a scholarship for someone in the community to get like Orton Gillingham training. And we would like to do this on a yearly basis. So,
That's great.
We want to build our reading instruction community and have it kind of come from the library.
That's lovely. Thank you.
I think one of the things in asking about the program is the first step really is increasing the awareness that for struggling readers, and for parents to understand, here are some of the signs to watch for. The second step is, if you are seeing some of these signs, then there are things that can be done, and you can use the decodables to help alleviate that struggling issue. So, and then really the specifics of the program depend on the needs of the particular library in that community. Does that help?
And, I think I'm going to add to that, Tracy, too. I mean, it's a really fair question because, obviously implementation and pressing into this is how easy that is key. And, we do have a lot of volunteers, and sometimes too, as Tracy said, the education, the awareness, where we end up getting involved, like if you're probably asking what the next steps are, what does a library say after these presentations? Where do you go? Often it's helped me create a collection. This is what I have. This is what I want to do. This is what my community is going through with the school. Can you help me create a collection? So sometimes we'll do a proposal for for that stage. Then sometimes I call it the technical aspect, which is what Mandy was talking about too with the cataloger. And we have a library committee working on a lot of those issues now, is the staff time or helping. And that's why we have discounts in your library, toolkit. You'll see there's discounts. So those are the next steps that I'd say after these presentations, we frequently get involved with. But then when we work with our volunteers at large, or as libraries are getting involved with Decodables, not all libraries hire us for professional development, or, they have a collection and they just don't know how to share it with the community, or, how to look through all the steps that Mandy is talking about. And that's where volunteers come in. And that's what this slide really is we also recommend a lot of outreach, even with the small collection. And we do help with that. That's why, we have a brand new Decodable story walk. That may sound like a small tool, but we host a little library in Albany, and we had that at a literacy day, and we're also installing it at a library outreach event in Troy, New York in 2 weeks. And that was huge. We had the mayor come asking me what Decodable Books are and just what makes this different from another story walk. We have all kinds of tools we put out, but we partner with the libraries in the outreach. And again, when I say we, it's our volunteers. So the next step, or what the program is really like, where are you reaching the community? What's your outreach like, or in the library, or are you having events in the library, or is there something outside of the library? And that's what we really encourage our volunteers or librarians to think about, because we do want to reach people and we want to make this information useful and accessible. We put together outreach packets too that you can create yourself or purchase through us. So there's not an off-the-shelf program. I mean, we have some e-commerce and some things you can buy, but there are steps. That's how I would describe it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. Thanks.
And one thing we are doing too is we are working on different, we're early on in different pilots to try to get some data about using these books for more informal reading programs, formal reading programs. And, just to backtrack too with data, here in Albany, the libraries don't carry the decodables. So somebody very smart recommended putting a QR code, because our little library ends up going through, 100 books a week, and including the ICSAM. And I'm like, I feel like our community doesn't have access to decodable books, but we work with a ton of libraries, around us that do it. Mandy's library isn't even in our system, so we can't put her QR code on. But I went to try to provide our local community with access, and the decodable books are all taken out until the end of May. And this was a week or two ago when I tried this. And so I thought that was a really good problem. I mean, a lot of our libraries are carrying them now, and they're not in, they're out, they're being, and that's what the librarians we follow up with. And so, the community definitely, parents are asking for these books for sure. So I think we're at the end of our presentation. We're just about at 2 o'clock. And are there questions?
I haven't gotten any more sent to me. I don't know about Ashley.
I know I reminded folks throughout to just pop in their questions. Claire, you're raising your hand.
I was just wondering if you all could talk about the Read in Color program that you have as well.
Yeah, that's part of our outreach model, because what we were, and matter of fact, we're going to be speaking at a little free library webinar in a couple of weeks. But the Read in Color program is really a pledge, and we do it through our little library to provide the community with access to books that looks like looks like the community, the family structures, the cultures, etc. So we host this library that includes diverse children's literature in decodable books. And it's really been a powerful combination. And we host literacy events right there because our library is at a sustainable urban farm in a very high needs community in Albany. There's all kinds of service organizations, and that's a wonderful program too. And we're in close touch with the little library, and they've been very excited about that. We paired decodable books once they learn what they are with diverse literature. And so, I mean, it's just an opportunity in the community for people to have just the most amazing books that I'm really quite proud to recommend when I seem to always be talking with grandmothers, but, you know, just the members of the community that are looking for books for their grandchildren to read, and to also be able to talk to them about books that help their kids learn to read. It's been very rewarding.
Thank you. So if somebody wants to get involved with Teach My Kid to Read, how can they do that?
Well, we'll go back. There are a couple of ways they can sign up. Any of the librarians can sign up on the hub. It's free. We post a ton of our information. There are a lot of stuff that's in your digital toolkit, as well as a lot of videos. And one thing we do is we know these books are hard to harder to initiate. So the publishers provide discounts to librarians that work with us. We also occasionally can support high needs communities through our donations that we receive as well. And there's a sign up sheet for that on our website, but the hub is the first step. I would say host a literacy day. We're going to be gearing up our volunteers probably over the next month to be able to work with the libraries for Dyslexia Awareness Month, which we also like to promote as Literacy Awareness Month, to create displays and really feature books for all kids. Contact us at info@teachmykidtoread.org anytime. We'd love to hear from, we love to hear from anybody. And as you can tell, I get very excited about this. And on May 21st, if anybody wants to visit the Capital District of New York, we're having what's called a reading extravaganza at the Troy Public Library. And we have Jill Lauren, the founder of Whole Phonics there. We'll have early literacy kits. We have a reading dog, and we have high-low books. We have decodable books, and we'll have diverse literature. And besides the reading dog, we'll have humans reading with kids. So it's a good way to just, see some of our outreach in action. And the Troy Public Library is housed near, I think, the biggest farmers market in the Northeast. So it could be worth the drive.
Thank you so much for sharing all that. I appreciate it.
Great. Well, we are just past our time. I want to thank everyone. I want to thank Claire, our partner, for bringing Teach My Kid to Read to both games of my attention. Thank you, Marian, Tracy, Mandy, for your time and work and sharing today. It was fantastic. Hopefully you all, you either through email or I put it in the chat, got access to that digital toolkit. So absolutely take a look in there. There is a ton of resources. With that, I just want to thank everyone this afternoon. As always, you'll get a survey email from us afterwards. Please take a few moments to fill it out. It just helps us plan what we do next. With that, have a great afternoon, everyone, and take care.
Thank you.